Welcome to Jackie's Craft Table. Hello everyone. Today I am crafting with Simon Says Stamp's September 2019 card kit. It's called Look for the Rainbows. Let's start off by seeing what it includes. There are 3 envelopes in Island Blue, Schoolhouse Red Metallic, and Audrey Blue Metallic. It always comes with a lollipop. This is a little jar of Nouveau Crystal Gems. I had a lot of fun with these. I used about the whole bottle by the time my 10 cards were complete. They're just gorgeous. I'm going to have to get me some more of these. This is a 3D embossing folder from Tim Holtz called Kaleidoscope. These are really fun to play with. I have another one that came in a past kit from Tim Holtz, and I just love it. These are some beautiful American Crafts enamel dots. The 6x8 pattern paper that came in this kit was a lot of fun to play with. I used most of it up, I think. I'm just going to flip through it so you can see the pretty patterns. And then I really loved the stamp set for this month. It's called Look for the Rainbows, and it's a 6x8 clear stamp set. I think flowers are my favorite things to color in. You also get a pack of metallic paper from Tim Holtz. And I don't use a lot of metallic paper in my card crafting, but I'm going to have to start because I had fun playing with these papers. They're really beautiful. And you get 7 sheets. I had a lot of this left over, even though I did use it on some of my cards. Here is the example page. And then here is the cardstock. You get Island Blue, Schoolhouse Red, Audrey Blue, and a 120-pound white cardstock. So that's everything included in this kit. So I reached right for a beautiful piece of the pattern paper. I just love text block pattern paper. And I'm going to stamp right on top of this. I'm going to use my Mini Misty so that I can restamp it if I need to. The text on this pattern paper is kind of a teal blue. It's really pretty. And then there's also some purples in this paper. I'm going to stamp out a mask so that I can add a few more flowers. And I want the stem to look as though it's behind the petals of this flower. I'm also stamping out a mask for this stem. I'm going to stamp some leaves over it, and I want them to appear as though they're behind it. And I'm stamping out one more flower. I think I'm using this flower upside down, but I didn't realize it at the time. I just thought that's how it was. I was watching Cassie Trask create with this card kit. I love watching her videos. She always has fabulous ideas. And she was using the stamp the proper way, the way you're supposed to use it. And it wasn't until I saw her use that it dawned on me that I was using it upside down. But it worked. To this card, I do start using it the right side up. I'm using some Polychromos Faber-Castell colored pencils just to put a little bit of color down on these petals. I love how the pattern of the paper shows through. So I'm using a soft teal color, and then I'm going to come in with a darker teal just to add some shadows. I'm going to speed this up a bit. And then on my second flower, I used the same teals as well as some purple, just to reflect the purple that's in the pattern paper. I think that looks so pretty. I'm using olive green on my stem and leaves. I've been using a lot of olive green lately on my greenery. It's just a phase I'm going through, but it sure looks pretty. And I'm also adding some purple to the leaves. This didn't take very long at all to color in. And then here I am putting yellow and a little bit of brown for the inside of the flower. My sentiment I'm going to heat emboss with some white embossing powder. I'm still using this little cube of Hero Arts embossing ink. I just love it. It's a nice juicy ink pad. I'm going to have to get a larger size. It's good stuff. But I will stamp out this sentiment, and this one says thinking of you. And I can pour over the white embossing powder. Now, I've recently purchased a new heat tool. It's the Wagner. And I got to tell you, I am loving this thing. It melts the pattern so fast and it heats up even faster. It's just fabulous. It's worth the investment, in my opinion. I'm attaching this to some of the rainbow pattern paper. And as you can see, I die cut a chunk of it out so I could use it on another card. It was just too pretty to waste. I'm using some more olive green to ground my flower. And I put a little bit of square foam behind my sentiment to pop it up. I will cut off the excess and add a few of the crystal gems. I think I pretty much add them to every single card. I love those things. Now on to card number 2. I wanted to use another piece of the gorgeous pattern paper, and I love this one with the clouds on it. So I'm going to stamp my sentiment right over the clouds. I'm going to ink it up a few times. This is kind of a textured piece of paper. And then I cut it out with an oval die. I'm going to do a little bit more coloring for this card. I'm just going to stamp out one of the flowers and a bird. And I'm just stamping it onto a piece of Nina Solar White cardstock. I'm using this rainbow pattern paper as my guide for the colors I'm choosing. And these are colors I never would have put together, but I really love how they look. And I don't think I've ever colored a flower like this before, where there are different colors on every petal, but I love it. And then I do add darker pencils for the shadows. My bird, I'm going to color in some blues and a little brown for his chest, and oranges. And then I'm going to fussy cut these images out. And here they are. Now it's time to put my card together. I used a piece of white cardstock and cut it out with a wonky stitch die. I'm using some of the Audrey blue paper as my card base. The sentiment, I'm going to use some foam tapes to pop it up a bit. And I'm just taping my card down just to hold it closed while I put it together. I will center that. And then I'm going to attach my flower. It's going to be half on the oval and half off. So I'm using glue and a little piece of foam. So it's the same height as the oval. And the bird I'm just gluing down flat onto the flower. Of course, more of the crystal gems. It's amazing how these little gems, just these little touches, can add a lot to your cards. So fun to use. And that completes card number 2. I did use another piece of the pattern paper on the inside and stamped another sentiment. For card number 3, I'm going to stamp the largest flower onto a piece of watercolor paper using some linen distress oxide ink. This ink will fade away as I watercolor over it. I also stamped out a mask so that I could stamp some of the leaves around it. This mask didn't work very well. I was just using a regular Post-it note, so I ended up taping it down with a piece of purple tape, but it worked. This is the Arches watercolor cold press paper. I'm actually using some Faber-Castell watercolor pencils on this one. These are new to my craft room. They were given to me as a gift, one of my darling sisters. So I'm putting a little bit of the color down first, and then I'm using rather a dry brush to melt the watercolor pencil out. It melts out beautifully. I really love these pencils. They're so much fun. I'm painting every other petal just because I don't want the colors to bleed together. I do end up putting down a few layers. And I'm going to be using 3 different colors of green on the leaves. Putting down my lightest first, and then a little bit of a darker pencil at the base of each leaf. And I'm just going to melt those out with the watercolor brush. And this allows the petals to dry, and I can be doing something while I'm waiting for them to dry. Now I'm going back to the flower, coloring in more petals. So I just keep going back and forth between the flower and the leaves. And I do use my heat tool in between sometimes just to make it go faster. Dry it really fast. Now I'm using a really teeny brush, and I'm using the tip of the pencils just to put pigment on the brush and adding a little more depth to my flowers. The center is going to be yellow and a little bit of brown. And then I'm going to set this panel aside to dry. I cut it out with a rounded corner faux stitch die, as well as this beautiful piece of green colored pattern paper. And I'm going to cut the corner of this piece out. I decided I wanted my sentiment to be the same color as my flower, so I just scribbled onto the leftover piece of watercolor paper and blended that out. And then once that is dry, I'm going to stamp my sentiment onto that. And I'm just using some Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink. I'll cut this out with another banner stitch die. I use these banners a lot in this card video too. I think these are one of my favorite die sets. And I cut another piece out of this metallic cardstock just so I could use it on another card. And I'm adhering my pattern paper on top of that. And then I can add it right to my card base. I'm going to glue down my sentiment flat. A little bit more of the liquid glue. And then the watercolor flower, I'm going to prop up with some foam squares. There, I think that looks so pretty. Then, of course, I'm going to pull out some more of the crystal gems. This jewel picker tool really comes in handy, but sometimes it won't release the crystals. Just stuck really good to the crystals sometimes. And that finishes off the card. I just love the metallic paper. It looks so pretty. Now on to the next card, and I just can't leave this pattern paper alone. It was all so pretty. I'm going to stamp this, I don't know what you would call it, a bloom of flowers or a sprig of flowers. And I'm using some more Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink to stamp it. I do stamp it up a few times because it is a new stamp. I like it nice and dark and crisp. Then I just flip my pattern paper around and stamp it again. So I'm going to pull out my Polychromos Faber-Castell pencils again. I'm not going to show you all the coloring this time. This video is long as it is. But I love how you can see the dots through the colored pencils. It's so pretty. And then I'm using a little bit of orange colored pencil to add shadows. And here it is, all finished. I was going to use it as a landscape card, but I really liked it as a portrait card. I'm stamping my sentiment between these flowers. I do wish that this stamp set had come with a happy birthday sentiment, because I need birthday cards more than anything else, it seems like. So I do a lot of thank you and thinking of you cards in this kit. And now I'm going to stamp a butterfly. I thought it just needed a little something more. And I'm going to color that in with some teal colors. There's a little bit of teal coloring in the flowers. Some of the little teeny berries I colored in with this same pencil. There, I think that looks so pretty. And I'm going to attach it to a white card base. And then, of course, more of the crystal gems. Like I said, I think I used up almost all of these. I only had just a few of the smallest ones left when I was done with this kit. And this is an instance where my jewel picker decided not to work. I don't know, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But here's the completed card. On the inside, I just used some leftover scrap paper. For my next card, I did lose a bit of the footage. I'll just explain to you what I'm doing. I'm going to stamp out my sentiments, and I want there to be a gap between the thank and the you. And you can certainly cut your stamps in half, and it won't damage them. But sometimes I'm not very brave, and I just wanted to mask the words. So I use a little bit of washi tape to mask the word as I stamp it, and then I peel it off, and then I can stamp the second word. I stamped that right onto a piece of the pattern paper. But let me back up here a little bit. The flower I stamped onto a piece of craft cardstock and colored in with more colored pencils, and I fussy cut that out. I cut out this piece of pattern paper with one of my larger faux stitch banner dies, and I'm gluing that flat onto my card. The second banner I'm propping up with some foam tape. And I just love this gorgeous orange metallic paper that I'm adhering these to. This reminds me of a fall time card, just because of all of the oranges. I'm trying to get that on straight. And then I'm going to glue the thank you sentiment onto one of the banners. And I'm going to glue that on flat as well as the flower. And then I'm using some glacier white stickles for the center of this flower and some more of the gems. And that finished off this card. This is one of my favorite. I just love the oranges and the teals. On my next card, I'm going to use the Tim Holtz embossing folder with a piece of the purple metallic paper. And here it is, all embossed. It's just gorgeous. I really love this folder. And I'm going to use some of the butterfly pattern paper. I'm cutting this out with an oval die, and I'm putting it where one of the butterflies is going to be my focus. And I'm actually going to color in that little butterfly with more colored pencils. Sorry, I use a lot of colored pencils on these cards. I'm cutting down even more of the pattern paper into strips. I'm even going to use this strip of purple paper at the top of this pattern paper. I thought it was such a pretty purple. And I'm going to fishtail the ends. These are going to be some long and narrow banners that I'm going to attach to this purple metallic paper. I'm using teal and purple again to color in my butterfly. There was even some purple in this pattern paper. I thought that was kind of pretty. And then kind of a lime green color as well. I pulled out a scrap piece of gray paper I had in my stash to stamp my sentiment on. And I'm going to heat emboss this with some more white embossing powder. I'll just funnel that back into the jar. And it just takes a second to melt that. I tried stamping the thank you sentiment right onto the pattern paper, but it kind of got lost. So I'm just covering it up with this strip of gray paper. I think that looks so pretty. And then I'm just going to cut it off so it fits this oval. Now I can adhere everything together. It takes a while for the glue to dry on this metallic paper, so I'm going to put an acrylic block on top for a minute. You won't see the hole in this piece of paper because I'm going to cover it with the oval. And then the oval I propped up with more foam tape. Then I can snip off the excess and add it to my card base. My card base was a little bit longer, so I'm just snipping that off as well. And I'm going to use one of the teal hearts next to this butterfly. And that completes this card. Now, card number 7, I'm using the pattern paper, a lot of pattern paper, as well as a piece of the metallic cardstock, as well as my faux stitch die, banner dies. And I'm going to tape these in place, and then I take them to my Sizzix Big Shot die cutting machine and cut those out. This is kind of a fast card to put together. I'm adhering the pattern paper down flat onto my card base. This is going to be a landscape card. And then the sentiment I'm going to stamp on another piece of this cloud pattern paper. And as I said, it does have a little bit of texture to it, so I have to stamp it up a few times. I always make sure to snug it up in the corner because the stamp always lifts up the paper when I open the door of the MISTI. The first banner I'm going to adhere down flat onto the metallic paper. And then the metallic paper I am propping up with some foam tape. I don't know what it was with this card kit, but everything I glued down was just crooked. So I do end up peeling up this banner. And I kind of ripped my paper. So I used another piece of pattern paper under it. Now I'm using my Arteza Everblend alcohol markers to color in these little birds. I really love these markers. The tips on them are so small that you can get into tiny little places like this bird and his beak. And usually I have a hard time with my Copics because they are so big. But don't get me wrong, I love my Copics, but I love these Artezas, and I will have a video coming out on these very soon. And here I am coloring in his teeny tiny orange beak with the marker, and it was just easy to do. So I colored in 3 of them. And I'm putting some foam tape behind them and attaching them to the top of my card. I also used 2 of the teal-colored enamel dots. I'm just hiding the paper where I bent it when I peeled it off of the front of the card. But here's the completed card. On card number 8, I'm going to use this really busy and bold pattern paper. And I'm going to stamp all 3 of the flowers onto pieces of this pattern paper. Sometimes I just like to use my acrylic block because it's faster than getting out my mini MISTI. This goes faster, and I like to use the VersaFine Onyx Black ink because it is such a thick, dark ink. It stamps up perfectly. You don't really have to stamp it more than once. I'm also going to stamp the leaves on this pretty striped paper. I had a little bit left of this paper. And then on the teal paper, I'm going to stamp out some of the stems. Now, I fussy cut these out, but I left a border, and I felt that this didn't look right. It just didn't give enough distinction to each of the petals. So I end up cutting them out again right along the inked line. But first, I'm going to add a very pale pink color inside the petals just to bring it all together. I'm using a black marker to rub along the edges just to make them look more finished, more polished. I think that does look a lot better when I cut it out right on the line. So I cut out another piece of the Audrey blue cardstock with a faux stitch die, and I adhered all my flowers down flat, except for the flower in the middle, which I propped up with some foam tape. Card number 9 isn't my favorite of my set of cards, but you just got to try things out and have fun. So I'm using this piece of patterned paper, and I'm going to cut out several of the flowers. I thought they were beautiful flowers. I'm also using the black, what would you call it, diagonal striped paper there to put behind my flowers, and I'm going to stamp my sentiment onto another piece of my scrap gray cardstock I had in my stash. And I'm going to heat emboss this with white embossing powder. I've had this white embossing powder in my stash for years, and I'm finally starting to make a dent in it. But I want to try some more fine detailed white embossing powder. I don't have any of that. Some of these sentiments are so small that I think that's what I need to use. So I'm going to adhere this oval flat onto the piece of black and white patterned cardstock. I'm just holding the outline of this oval in place so that I can adhere it straight. And now I'm going in and adding the outline or the frame. And next I'm going to adhere my flowers down flat onto this card with some more liquid glue. I'm going to speed this up a bit. And then I felt that it was just missing something. So I add another flower there at the top, and I adhere this down onto a white card base. So on the inside, I'm going to adhere this piece of scrap pattern paper. And I'm going to add a few more gems, but it was still missing something. So I'm going to come in with this bright green oval frame and just glue it on top. And I'm not sure if this helped out or not, but that's card number 9. Take it for what it is, I guess. It's just fun sitting down and crafting. Anyway, it's nice having thank you cards on hand. Now on to the last card. I'm using a piece of craft cardstock for this card, and I'm using this beautiful leaf stamp, and I'm going to stamp it out repeatedly over this panel using some VersaFine Onyx Black ink. It just screamed fall to me. I just loved this stamp. I'm turning my acrylic block around so that I can just stamp it out in random directions. And I'm using more VersaFine Onyx Black ink for this. I should have used my dye ink, my black dye ink, because I end up using some alcohol markers on this piece. And the alcohol markers make this ink smear a little bit, but it did work out all right. I just kept going with the card. And I'm going to put a piece of type paper behind this because I want to stamp off the edge so it looks like the pattern continues. This is kind of like creating your own coloring sheet. It's so much fun. And it's also really fun to use your alcohol markers on the craft cardstock. It just kind of mutes and desaturates your colors. But I thought this would be perfect for a fall time card. So I chose my markers accordingly. And these are the Arteza markers again. Love the narrow tip on these. It just makes using them so easy. Getting into the smaller sections of your stamps. And I'll have the colors I use listed over on my blog. I'm just going to show you the 4 different colors I used. So I'm using kind of a pinkish red, a yellow, this one's kind of a pink toned brown, and then my last one's going to be more of a brighter orange. I think that looks so pretty on this paper. After I finish my initial coloring, I do come in with darker markers, one for each shade, to add some shadows. So here are the darker colors I selected. I'm going to use a flicking motion at the bottoms and the tops of these leaves, just to add some cute detail and a little bit of shading. I think it adds a lot. Seems like a lot of coloring, but it went pretty fast. And I really love the result. So let me speed this up so we're not here all day. And I'll show you the other shades of alcohol markers that I used. If you look really close, you can kind of see that the ink is smearing a little bit. I did allow it time to dry, but it's just this pigment ink that the alcohol markers didn't want to play well with. So if you're going to give this card a try, make sure you use black dye ink. However, the VersaFine Onyx Black ink is a great ink to watercolor with because it's waterproof, or to use your colored pencils on. That finishes up my coloring. Now I can start putting this card together. I'm using a wonky stitch die to cut this panel out with. I wanted it to be just a little bit smaller so that I could mat it with some of this gold metallic paper. I cut this gold metallic paper down to 5.5 by 4.25. And I'm also cutting out another piece of craft paper and a green metallic paper with my faux stitch banner die. I went ahead and colored another leaf with green Copic markers just to add a little something to the sentiment. So I will adhere my two banners together, just with a little bit of dot liner. And then I'm going to prop them up with some foam tape. I'm going to put some foam tape behind my green leaves, as well as a little bit of liquid glue, just so it's the same height as my sentiment banners. And for the finishing touch, some more crystal gems, and that finishes off this card. Well, I had a blast working with this card kit. I know that you can buy all of the materials from the kit separately if it has sold out by the time you see this video. I have pictures and more information about these cards I created over on my blog. I hope these cards have given you some inspiration and you get a chance to sit down and create something awesome today. Thank you, my crafty friends, for watching. Have a wonderful day. Bye.